Signs of distress in the commercial real estate sector as very few lenders are now willing to provide financing. Our next guest expects this trend to continue and says that office values won't regain pre-pandemic levels until 2040. For more, let's bring in Kiran Raichura, Capital Economics Deputy Chief Property Economist. That's a very, very long road when you consider some of these developers and when those current mortgages, that debt's going to be due. What does that suggest in terms of the risk of default, which has really been hanging over the market?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It does suggest that we're going to see a large number of office properties handed back to lenders, and we're already starting to see some of that happening, both in terms of some specific loans where property owners have worked out that it doesn't make economic sense for them to hold on to those assets, and then they've handed those back to the banks, particularly in some of the hardest hit cities. And we're also seeing increasing distress amongst CMBS loans. So the office CMBS distress delinquency rate is now above 4%.
Kieran, when you take into account what happened in New York this week, the big deal, SL Green selling the 50% stake in one of its Grand Central buildings for $2 billion, does that add any sort of comfort just in terms of the fact that, hey, maybe it's not as weak of a position that we initially thought it was?
I think, there are always going to be some buyers out there. For assets to transact, there have to be buyers there. And we know that's what happens in a downturn. Activity slows, but there's still people who look to take those opportunities. But what I would say is that a lot of the assets that are transacting are doing so at substantial discounts to the values they would have transacted at previously. And so there are really good examples of buildings, particularly in the worst hit cities like San Francisco, that are transacting at between 50 and 70 or 80% less than what they were previously valued at some point prior to the pandemic.